And so one of the ways we're going to be successful with writing academic research is setting up a framework for success. And by setting up that framework, we're going to have a paper and a report that has organized information in it that is easier for you to compose and develop, as well as it is easier for the reader to read and understand what you're trying to communicate. So let's talk about the nuts and bolts of our project to start. So we're going to start out, we're looking for around 1,200 words, which is about 4.5 to 6 pages. But just the general idea that 1,200 words gives you enough information to be able to concretely explain the concepts that you're trying to communicate. We're using MLA format, as we are with all papers that are written in our English department. And remember that this is, in terms of formatting, we're reporting information. We're not posing a solution. We're not trying to argue a point. We're simply trying to report information and give our reader the broadest view of whatever the best practices are or whatever information is relevant on the given topic that you've chosen. So in terms of some other nuts and bolts pieces we need to know, we are looking for at least 5 sources. And from each of those 5 sources, well, before that, we want 3 different kinds of sources. And by different kinds of sources, we're talking about anything from research, published research, magazine articles, online articles, newspapers, all the different kinds of genre of information that we can find that is out there, even like maybe a trade publication. But 3 different kinds of sources where we might find information on this topic. And then in terms of our 5 sources, we're looking for, we hope, 2 quotes per source. With, out of those 2 quotes, 1 being a paraphrase. Paraphrase meaning just taking the author's words and putting it into your own words. And 1 being a direct quote. Now, you can have more than that, but that's what we're looking for in terms of minimum. So that would be 10 quotes. Total again. That's kind of our minimum standard. So as we're going to talk through bits and pieces of this, I wanted to explain educationally why we're framing this as we're framing this. And as I talked about in our very first unit, how we organize information, we talked about Bloom's taxonomy. And instead of the upright triangle, I flipped my triangle upside down, and I'll kind of walk you through this. So down here, still at the base, we're talking about remembering. And obviously, when we're memorizing things, that's all we're doing. We're remembering things. We're memorizing it. We're putting it into our short-term knowledge, hopefully long-term knowledge, and getting that. And maybe we're coming up to that next level if it's a concept, working on understanding. With projects such as this research project, this reporting information, we're getting into that next level of higher order thinking. So we're talking about applying information, and then we're creating, which is what you are doing. You're creating new information by combining all of your sources and information together. And in the process of searching through the resources, you're evaluating. the different information that you're coming across to decide what is relevant and what is not. And part of that, deciding what is and isn't relevant, is analysis. So you can see that in previous learning, we've been down here in this remembering and understanding. In college, in a composition class, as we're going through this information, and as you're going to use in life, we're going to be working much more up here in these higher levels of taking information, creating new things, applying it, evaluating, analyzing it to come to the best conclusions that we know how. So one of the first steps that we need to go through as we're thinking about our research report is, read the directions for this project. And as you've noticed, our project deals with scenarios based in applying the information we're finding to a specific scenario. So you might choose the scenario that deals with an animal shelter that isn't being very successful in getting animals out into adopted homes. And so you realize that your situation, you have a very specific audience, you have a very specific charge, and in that case, you're looking to identify the best practices in animal rescues and adoptions in order to help the agency that you're assigned to be more successful at their mission. So just as we talked about in our first unit, we really need to be mindful of the rhetorical situation that is going on in our situation. So let's talk about rhetorical situation as it applies. So very first thing we want to do is figure out our topic. So by now you've chosen which scenario you want to work on. There are 7 scenarios total. So your topic, this is your scenario, your situation that you've chosen. Within that, we're going to go into rhetorical situation now. So you have your audience. You might have a board of directors that you're creating this report for. You might have a boss, if you're looking at one of the workplace scenarios. You might have a professor if you're looking at an academic proposal to create your own independent study. I think another one, your audience is your coworkers. So audience, one of our steps for our rhetorical situation. In rhetorical situation, we talk about our purpose or our stance. Our purpose for all of these projects is information. Being informational, reporting information. But you're not reporting just any information. You're reporting the best information, whether it's the best practices or other people's designs for if you're proposing a design for a research, for your independent study. It's reporting what the best information is out there, or the best practices, or the most relevant information for your specific situation. But as we said over here, it's not presenting an argument, it's not posing the solutions, it's taking all the information out there, sorting through it, sifting through it, and finding the best information for your situation. In terms of stance, because we're not really taking a position on it, stance isn't as relevant in this particular context. The context that you're going to want to talk about here, as we're talking about rhetorical situation in your research project, is the scenario background that you're working with, and ultimately your motivations and desired outcomes. Why are you in that particular scenario? Why did you choose that scenario and put yourself into that situation as the character or as the student that is doing whatever that research project is, and explaining kind of the scenario background and the outcomes that the audience is looking for. Now, some of them, there's not a lot of information, so you're allowed to be a little bit creative and fill in the blanks if the information isn't fully fleshed out in the situation you've chosen. Lastly, when we're talking about rhetorical situation, we're always talking about medium and design. Well, we've already outlined that all right here when we talked about the nuts and bolts of our particular project. So medium, it's a research report, it's a research paper. We're going to use MLA formatting. We know about the length that would be appropriate for it, and we know the design features that we're looking for within our particular project. So as we're fleshing this out, let's talk through why we're doing scenarios and how we're doing those scenarios. So just as we did in math class, you had a math problem that was a word problem. And right now, I felt all of your eyes just roll a little bit as you thought, oh dear God, story problems and math. Yes, this is using the same concepts and the same framework. It is not going to be as difficult as you are mentally making it out to be right now. The whole idea of using scenarios is to help us think in a problem solution kind of framework. And in life, we are going to come across things that we're going to need to look up and find more information. And so in order to practice that very skill that we're going to use in our future careers and in life in general, we need to start putting our academic skills into use. So in learning, in education, we call this applied learning. We're taking actual skills from the classroom and putting them into play and into practice. So our scenarios, problem solution. And that's the kind of framework that we're thinking in right now. So in our introduction, one of those things we're probably going to want to talk about is the problem that we're dealing with, or the problem that we're thinking about, or the problem that we need to find research in order to fill in the blanks of how to, fix this particular problem. Now, you don't have to conclude what the best one is. You're presenting the best research out there, and we're giving some choices, because obviously there are more than one ways to solve a problem. So let's go ahead and stop this video for here. We've got an idea of our framework of what we're doing and how we're doing it. In the next video, I'm going to talk through the mechanics of how we do this paper and the bits and pieces, how we're going to put it all together. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you in class.